The rain pounded against the windshield as I gripped the steering wheel, heart hammering. I had taken a late-night route home after working overtime, the streets empty except for the occasional flickering street lamp. The hum of the engine was the only sound until I saw a figure standing by the side of the road, drenched and shivering. I slowed down and rolled the window halfway. "Hey, do you need a ride?" I asked, trying to sound calm. The figure stepped closer, a young woman soaked, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, I don't have anywhere to go. I just need to get home," she whispered. I hesitated for a split second. Something about her voice made me uneasy, but I shook it off. "Okay, get in." As she climbed into the car, I noticed a strange glint in her eyes, almost too focused, too calculating. My instincts screamed something was off, but I forced myself to stay polite. "Where do you live?" I asked. She gave me an address a few blocks away. I started the engine again, but the air felt heavy, tense, like a storm waiting to break inside the car. I tried to make small talk. "Crazy night, huh?" She didn't respond at first. Then she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You don't know the half of it," she said, her voice low, almost a hiss. I felt a chill run down my spine. The streetlights flickered as we drove past dark alleys, and suddenly I noticed something strange. She kept glancing at me, not normally, but like she was studying me, memorizing every move. The car ahead had a broken streetlight, plunging us into darkness. My heart raced. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to hide the unease in my voice. She leaned closer, her wet hair sticking to her face. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. "I've been waiting for someone like you." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I tried to think, to make a mental note of every detail. Her voice, the way she moved, the way she breathed. Something in me knew I had to be careful. I forced a laugh, trying to seem relaxed. "Well, lucky me, I guess." The car rolled quietly through the rain-slick streets. My mind raced, realizing how isolated I was. What had seemed like a simple act of kindness now felt dangerous. And I had no idea that the night ahead would test every ounce of my courage and wits. A loud crash of thunder made me jump. She tilted her head, smiling faintly, almost amused by my fear. "You'll see soon," she said cryptically. I swallowed hard, a cold fear settling deep in my chest. Something told me this wasn't just a stranded girl needing a ride. This was the beginning of a trap, and I was already driving straight into it. The rain continued to hammer the roof of the car as we turned a corner. And in that moment I realized I might not make it out alive if I didn't act fast. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my racing mind. I had to survive. Somehow I had to escape. The woman's smile widened. "You'll regret stopping for me," she said softly, almost to herself. I glanced at her and my instinct screamed, "Run." But how? The streets were empty, the rain deafening, and she was beside me, calm, calculating, dangerous. And that was when the first glimmer of my fight for survival sparked inside me. The night had only just begun. The car slowed at a stoplight, and I realized I needed to think fast. My pulse was pounding in my ears, louder than the rain. I kept my hands on the wheel, forcing my face to stay calm, even though panic clawed at my chest. She leaned back in her seat, watching me with that unsettling smile. "Do you always drive strangers home at night?" she asked, her voice silky, almost teasing. I forced a chuckle, trying to sound casual. "Not usually, just felt like helping someone tonight." Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she was testing me, studying my every reaction. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I glanced at the rearview mirror and noticed no other cars around, just wet streets, dark buildings, and the rain pouring down like a curtain. The stoplight turned green, and I drove on, keeping my mind sharp. I needed a plan. Anything could happen. I couldn't just react, I had to think ahead. "You seem nervous," she said suddenly, leaning forward just enough that I caught her reflection in the side mirror. "Is it because of me?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "It's just the weather. Rain makes me tense." She tilted her head, studying me. "Or maybe you just have a feeling something bad is coming." Her voice dropped to a whisper, almost menacing. "Don't you?" I realized I couldn't just talk my way out anymore. Her calmness, her presence, it wasn't normal. My gut screamed that she was dangerous, that the ride wasn't just about getting home. I needed to get out of the car, but how without provoking her? I spotted a gas station up ahead, its bright lights cutting through the darkness. Maybe I could stop there, call for help, or at least have people around. I took a deep breath and prepared. "I'm going to stop at the gas station up here," I said casually, trying to sound normal. "Need to grab something." Her smile didn't falter. "Sure, whatever you need," she said, almost too sweetly, but the way her eyes glinted in the rearview mirror made my stomach twist. I pulled into the lot, the neon lights reflecting off the wet asphalt. Cars were scattered sparsely, but it was better than nothing. I tried to act normal, but my mind raced. I couldn't let her see my fear. It would make things worse. She leaned back in her seat again, hands resting on her lap. "You know," she said softly, almost conversationally, "sometimes people don't get a second chance, but maybe you'll be lucky tonight." The words hit me like ice water. My heart pounded. She wasn't just a stranded girl. This was a predator, and I was inside her trap. I fumbled with my seatbelt, planning my next move. I needed to distract her, maybe get her out of the car, even for a moment, just enough to create an opportunity to escape. The air inside the car felt heavier, charged with tension. The storm outside mirrored the storm in my chest, fear, adrenaline, and the desperate need to survive. I glanced at her one last time before stepping out. Her eyes followed me, calm, knowing, dangerous. I realized in that moment that tonight, my instincts were the only thing keeping me alive, and the first step of survival had to happen now. I stepped out of the car, the cold rain soaking through my clothes instantly. My heart was still racing, but I forced myself to act calm, taking slow, deliberate steps toward the gas station. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. She didn't move. She stayed in the car, watching me with that unnerving smile. I could feel her eyes burning into my back as I walked, every nerve on edge. I grabbed a soda from the vending machine, hands trembling slightly. The clink of the bottle felt deafening in the empty lot. I tried to act casual, pretending I was just a man running an errand. When I turned back to the car, she was still sitting there, waiting, calm as ever. My stomach twisted. She wasn't going to let this go. I considered my options. The gas station had a clerk inside, maybe even a camera. If I could just get her to step out of the car or distract her, I might be able to run inside and get help. I walked back slowly, keeping my voice steady. "Hey, do you want a soda? I grabbed one for you." Her smile widened slightly. "No, thank you," she said softly, but there was something in her tone that didn't feel like a refusal. It felt like a test. I forced a casual laugh. "Okay, suit yourself." I tried to inch closer to the driver's side door, just enough to glance at her hands, see if she had anything. My pulse raced. Suddenly, she spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "You're clever, but not clever enough." I froze, the words slicing through me. She knew I was planning something. She knew I was thinking. The chill that ran down my spine was immediate. I forced myself to act natural, stepping back as if I were just returning to the car. But inside, my mind was spinning. I needed a distraction, any distraction, to get the upper hand. Then I noticed it, a reflection in the gas station window. A security camera mounted high, watching the lot. If I could get her attention for just a second, the footage could be my lifeline. I took a deep breath. "I think we should wait inside for the rain to stop," I said lightly, motioning toward the gas station. "It's really coming down." She tilted her head, watching me, her eyes calculating. Then almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "Fine, but don't think I'm not paying attention." That tiny gesture was my opening. My heart pounded as I quickly slid into the passenger seat instead of the driver's side, keeping my body low and ready. She started the engine, and the car lurched forward slightly. I knew I had to act fast. The next few moments could determine whether I survived the night or didn't. The storm outside roared louder, the rain hammering down, mirroring the tension in my chest. Every second was a test of courage, instinct, and wit. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Survival isn't just about running. It's about outsmarting the predator waiting for you. I stayed crouched low in the passenger seat, my eyes locked on hers. She glanced at me with a half smile, like she knew I was planning something. My hands gripped the edge of the seat, ready to spring into action. The car started rolling slowly back onto the dark street. The rain was relentless, drumming on the roof like a warning. I realized I had to make a move before we were completely isolated. "Hey," I said casually, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe we should turn around. This street looks dangerous in the rain." She tilted her head, studying me. "Dangerous? You're exaggerating. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." I forced a smile, but inside, panic and adrenaline collided. I needed a plan that didn't rely on luck. I needed control. As we drove past another dark alley, I noticed a small side street illuminated by a flickering street lamp. It was narrow, barely 2 lanes wide, but it led to a busier road. If I could get her to turn, I might be able to make a run for it. "Hey, why don't we take that side street?" I suggested casually, pointing. "It might be faster." Her eyes flicked toward the street, then back at me. She didn't respond immediately. That pause was all I needed. I leaned slightly toward the door handle, preparing to bolt. But the moment I touched it, she snapped her head toward me. "Careful," she hissed. "You might trigger something you don't want to." My stomach twisted, but I didn't back down. I forced calm into my voice. "I just want to get home safely, that's all." The tension in the car was suffocating, thick as the rain pouring outside. Every muscle in my body was taut, ready to react to the slightest movement. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "You know, most people don't even notice the trap until it's too late. Lucky for you, maybe you're different." That was my confirmation. This wasn't just a woman in the rain. This was a predator setting the stage for something terrifying. I forced my mind to focus, ignoring the fear clawing at me. My only chance was to stay one step ahead, think faster than she expected, and wait for the perfect moment. As the car approached the narrow side street, I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding like a drum, but a spark of determination lit inside me. I wasn't going to be a victim tonight. And in that instant, I knew survival wasn't just about running. It was about strategy, timing, and trusting every instinct screaming in my head. Storm outside raged, but inside the car, the real battle was about to begin. The car slowed as we entered the narrow side street. Puddles splashed against the tires, reflecting the flickering street lamp above. My heart hammered, each beat a reminder that I had only seconds to act if I wanted to survive. She glanced at me again, her eyes sharp, almost predatory. "You seem tense," she said, her voice deceptively soft. "Do you get nervous easily?" I forced a laugh, trying to sound casual. "I guess." "Yeah, storms make me a little jumpy." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Or maybe you just don't like strangers," she whispered, leaning closer. The scent of rain and something metallic hit me. My instincts screamed danger. I realized the narrow street left little room to maneuver. If she tried something, I couldn't just slam the brakes and run. I needed a plan, and fast. I scanned the street for anything that could help me, a parked car to hide behind, a curb to jump onto, maybe even a pedestrian crossing. My eyes caught a small convenience store sign flickering a block ahead. People, lights, cameras, my lifeline. I cleared my throat. "I think we're close to a place where we can get out of this rain," I said, pointing toward the store. "Just a block ahead, I could grab a coffee or something." She tilted her head, considering, then nodded slowly. "Fine," she said. "But make it quick." The engine's hum filled the tense silence as we drove. My pulse raced, calculating every second. I had to make my move the moment we stopped. I rehearsed it in my head: bolt, make noise, attract attention. The store lights grew brighter. Relief sparked in me, but I couldn't let it show. Predators like her can sense weakness. As we pulled into the empty parking lot, I forced a casual stretch, pretending to relax. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the door handle, feeling the cold metal. She didn't move yet. She was waiting, watching, probably anticipating my next step. I whispered under my breath, almost to myself, "This is it. Don't mess it up." The tires crunched on wet asphalt as I pushed the door open just a fraction, testing her reaction. Her eyes flicked toward my hand, and for a split second I saw recognition, like she knew I was planning to run. I took a deep breath, forcing calm into my movements. My legs were ready to sprint, my mind razor sharp. Every instinct screamed, "Move now." The storm outside continued its relentless assault, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, a fight for survival, a test of courage, and the first real chance I had to escape the serial killer's trap. This was the moment that would define the night. The moment my foot touched the wet asphalt, I bolted. The rain soaked my clothes instantly, but adrenaline drowned out the cold. I heard the car door slam behind me, and her startled laugh cut through the storm. "Going somewhere?" she called out, her voice chillingly calm despite the chaos. I didn't look back. My eyes were fixed on the store, its fluorescent lights promising safety. My lungs burned, but I pushed harder, sprinting across the slick parking lot. Every puddle I splashed through felt like a countdown to freedom or failure. She jumped out of the car, her coat flapping wildly in the wind. "You can't run from me," she shouted, taking long strides to catch up. I glanced back for a split second. Her movements were unnervingly fast, precise. Panic tried to claw at me, but I shoved it aside. I had to stay focused. The store entrance was just ahead. I skidded on the wet pavement, barely catching myself, and threw open the door. The bell above jingled loudly. Inside, the warmth hit me, mingled with the smell of coffee and sanitizer. My heart pounded as I spun around. The store clerk, a middle-aged man with a thick coat, looked up from behind the counter. "Hey, what's wrong?" She stopped at the threshold, rain dripping from her hair, and froze. I didn't wait for her reaction. I ran straight to the clerk. "Call the police. She's trying to. She's dangerous." The clerk's eyes widened as she took a step forward, her face momentarily twisting with a flash of anger, then slipping back into that eerie calm. "Oh, don't be silly," she said, voice sweet and unnerving. "I'm just cold and wet, isn't that right?" I backed toward the counter, never taking my eyes off her. "No, you're dangerous. You're not who you say you are." The clerk fumbled for the phone. "Police. Yeah, there's someone threatening me in the store. Please hurry." She took a step back, her eyes narrowing. "You think this is over?" she whispered, almost to herself, before retreating to the street. I heard the car start again and tires splash into the puddles as she sped off into the stormy night. I sank against the counter, shaking, soaked, and exhausted. The clerk kept glancing at me, confused and concerned. I couldn't speak for a moment, the adrenaline still coursing through me. Finally, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, I survived." Outside, the storm continued, relentless. But inside, a profound sense of relief and the first glimmer of safety washed over me. I knew this wasn't just luck. It was instinct, awareness, and sheer will that had saved me tonight. And deep down, I realized the moral of this night: Sometimes survival depends not on strength alone, but on paying attention, trusting your instincts, and acting decisively when danger lurks. The police would arrive soon, but I knew one thing for certain. I had escaped a trap that could have ended everything. Storm had eased into a steady drizzle by the time the police arrived. Two officers hurried into the store, their flashlights cutting through the dim, wet night. I explained everything, my voice still shaky, reliving each terrifying moment. "Did you get a good look at her?" one officer asked, scribbling notes. "Yes," I said, trying to steady my voice. She was calculating, calm but dangerous. I think she's been planning this." The second officer frowned. "Any idea where she might have gone?" I shook my head. She drove off before I could see clearly. But she's fast, smart, and she knows the streets. She's not easy to catch." The officers exchanged a look, concern flickering in their eyes. One officer nodded. "We'll do our best. Thanks for alerting us in time." Even as they spoke, I felt a lingering fear. The memory of her eyes, the way she studied me, stayed vivid. I realized how close I had come to disaster and how lucky I had been to escape. The clerk offered me a towel and a hot coffee. I accepted, hands trembling, trying to calm myself. The warmth of the cup grounded me, but the adrenaline still coursed through my veins. I glanced out the window at the empty, rain-slicked street. She could be anywhere now, waiting, watching. The thought made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to focus on the present. I was safe for now. One officer spoke again. "Do you want to give a statement at the station? It'll help us track her down." I nodded, realizing that sharing my experience wasn't just about my safety. It could prevent her from hurting someone else. "Yes, I'll do it. I want to make sure no one else falls into her trap." As I recounted every detail, the ride, the strange smile, her words, I felt a mixture of fear, relief, and determination. Surviving tonight wasn't just luck. It was about staying alert, trusting my instincts, and taking action when it mattered most. Outside, the rain lightened and the storm was fading. But the lesson of the night remained clear. Danger can be disguised as normal, even harmless, and only awareness and courage can save you when the moment demands it. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had happened settle over me. I had survived a serial killer's trap, and I knew the night had changed me forever, taught me the value of vigilance, quick thinking, and the will to fight for my life. Even as fear lingered in the shadows, I promised myself one thing: I would never ignore my instincts again. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, but it did little to chase away the unease that lingered in my chest. I was home, safe, but every shadow, every sound seemed amplified. The night's terror had left its mark. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, replaying every moment. The way she had smiled, the way she had spoken, it haunted me. How easily a stranger could turn into a predator, how close I had come to never seeing another morning. The phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was the police. "We got a lead," the officer said. "Security cameras from nearby streets caught her car heading north. We're tracking it." I exhaled sharply. Relief and tension collided. "Do you think you'll catch her?" I asked. The officer's voice was calm but serious. "We'll do our best, but she's careful. You did the right thing by getting into the store and calling us. That probably saved your life." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you," I said softly. After hanging up, I sat in silence, realizing something important. Surviving wasn't just about the immediate danger. It was about the decisions you make in those moments, the instincts you trust, and the courage to act. I pulled out a notebook and began writing everything down, every detail I could remember. Her words, her movements, the car, the streets. I knew this record might help catch her, or at least prevent others from falling into her trap. As I wrote, the memory of the stormy night started to fade slightly, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. I had survived, and now I could turn that survival into action. The moral hit me with clarity. Fear is natural, but courage and awareness are stronger. Trust your instincts and don't dismiss the small signals. They can save your life. By the time I finished, the morning had fully arrived. Birds chirped outside, the world moving on as if nothing had happened. But I knew I had changed. I wasn't just a survivor. I was someone who had faced danger and lived to tell the story, a story that could warn, teach, and maybe even save lives. And deep down, I realized, sometimes the scariest nights leave the most important lessons. That evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there. Every car that passed by, every shadow in the alley made my heart race. I kept the lights on and double-locked every door, but the memory of her eyes and that sinister smile haunted me relentlessly. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Police search for suspected serial predator after narrow escape. My stomach sank as I read the article. They were describing her, the same woman who had tried to trap me. I felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that she hadn't caught me, but fear that she was still free. I couldn't just sit idle. I decided to take precautions for the future. I mapped out my routes, avoiding isolated streets at night. I started carrying a small personal alarm and pepper spray in my bag. Every instinct I had honed during the attack now guided my decisions. A knock at the door startled me. I froze, heart racing. Slowly, I approached and peeked through the peephole. No one was there, just the wind rattling the porch. My pulse didn't slow for a long time after that. I sank into the couch, thinking about how easily life can turn upside down. One simple act of kindness, offering a ride, had almost cost me everything. But it also taught me a critical lesson: trust your instincts, even when it's uncomfortable. Your life may depend on it. As I sat there, rain lightly tapping against the window, I realized something else. Fear can be paralyzing, but action, awareness, and preparation can give you power. I had survived because I acted, because I observed, because I refused to freeze in terror. I whispered to myself, almost as a vow, never again will I ignore my instincts. Never again will I take safety for granted. And in that quiet, tense night, I understood something vital. The real danger isn't always visible, but the courage to act, the awareness to notice, and the wisdom to respond can make the difference between life and death. The night had ended, but the lessons it taught me were just beginning. The next few days were tense. I couldn't stop thinking about her, how she had studied me, anticipated my moves, and almost trapped me. Every minor sound outside my apartment made me flinch. Even the ringing of my phone sometimes felt like a threat. I decided I needed to reclaim my life, to not let fear control me. I started small, walking during the day instead of driving everywhere, turning on more lights at home, and letting a friend know my whereabouts. Safety wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about being prepared and alert. One afternoon, I sat down with my notebook again, reviewing every detail of that night. I realized how lucky I had been to notice the little signals, the way she watched me, the way she spoke, and even the strange glint in her eyes. Those details had saved me. As I reread my notes, I understood the deeper lesson. Survival isn't just luck. It's observation, intuition, and the courage to act. Every choice I had made, from offering her a ride to bolting toward the store, had counted. And those choices had kept me alive. Later, I went to a self-defense class, wanting to feel stronger, more capable. The instructor emphasized awareness over brute strength, watching your surroundings, trusting your instincts, and knowing when to act. Each drill reminded me of that night and how every second had mattered. That evening, I took a walk in the park near my apartment just to test myself. My heart raced at first, remembering the terror of being hunted. But I forced myself to breathe, to observe, and to move confidently. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. As I walked, I realized something important. Life doesn't stop after danger passes. It challenges you to grow, to become stronger, and to turn fear into awareness and courage. I returned home, feeling a little lighter. The stormy night hadn't just been a test of survival. It had been a lesson, a stark reminder that life can change in an instant, and the difference between being a victim and surviving can be the awareness and courage you carry within. And from that day on, I vowed, I would never ignore the signs, never underestimate danger, and always trust the instincts that had saved my life. A week passed, and though life was slowly returning to normal, I couldn't shake the sense that she was still out there somewhere. Every news report about unsolved attacks made my stomach twist. I knew I had been lucky, but luck alone couldn't guarantee my safety, or anyone else's. I decided to take proactive steps. I reported every detail I could remember to the police, even small things that seemed insignificant at the time. The make and model of her car, the street names we passed, the way she spoke. I knew these details could help catch her and possibly save someone else. That evening, I checked my apartment, making sure all the locks were secure and windows closed. I installed an extra chain lock and even set up a small camera by the door. It felt excessive, but after what I had survived, caution wasn't paranoia, it was survival. I also reached out to a friend I trusted. I need someone to check in with me regularly, I said, just in case. They agreed immediately, and I felt a small comfort in knowing I wasn't alone. I realized that after a terrifying experience, connecting with others wasn't just emotional support, it was part of staying safe. Later that night, I went over the night in my mind again. The lessons were becoming clearer. The fear, the adrenaline, the tiny decisions I had made, they weren't random. Each choice had built my survival. I whispered quietly, almost like a mantra. Trust your instincts, observe, act, never ignore the warning signs. And slowly I felt a shift inside me. Fear was still there, it couldn't just vanish, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had become a guide, a reminder to be vigilant, aware, and prepared. That night I fell asleep with a sense of cautious peace. I had survived the unimaginable, and I knew deep down that the lessons of that night would stay with me forever, shaping the way I moved, acted, and lived. Survival wasn't just about escaping, it was about learning, growing, and becoming stronger in the face of danger. A few days later, I found myself driving home from work again, but this time I was hyper-aware of my surroundings. Every pedestrian, every parked car, every flicker of movement caught my attention. The memory of that night was still vivid, a constant reminder that danger could be anywhere. I reached a stoplight and noticed a woman standing by the curb, holding a bag and looking drenched from the rain. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment panic rose, but then I reminded myself to stay calm and observant. I slowed down, scanning her carefully. Something about her posture and eyes didn't trigger the same alarms from before. This was a real person, not a threat, but my instincts told me to notice the details, to stay alert, and to trust my judgment. I kept driving slowly, giving her enough space, and the light turned green. As I moved on, I felt a mixture of anxiety and empowerment. I hadn't frozen. I had stayed aware and assessed the situation calmly. When I reached home, I reflected on how much had changed in me since that night. I realized survival isn't just about fleeing danger. It's about learning to trust your instincts, to assess situations carefully, and to take action when necessary. I also understood another truth: fear is a teacher. It's uncomfortable, exhausting, and sometimes terrifying, but it sharpens your mind, makes you cautious, and can ultimately save your life. I sat in my living room, taking a deep breath, the night approaching. The memory of her smile, her words, and the trap I had narrowly escaped still lingered, but now it served as a lesson rather than a source of paralyzing fear. I whispered to myself, determined, I will not let fear control me. I will remain aware, cautious, and strong. I will survive, and I will protect myself. And in that quiet moment, I realized the most important lesson of all. Danger may come unannounced, but preparedness, awareness, and courage can make all the difference. That night, sleep came fitfully. Every creak of the apartment, every rustle outside the window made me tense. I couldn't stop thinking about her, the woman who had nearly trapped me, and the terrifying calm she carried. The phone rang, startling me. It was the police. My stomach tightened. "We've got a lead," the officer said. "A witness saw a car matching her description near another neighborhood. We're following up, but it's still early." Relief mixed with unease. She was still out there. But knowing the authorities were on the case gave me a small sense of safety. I hung up and went to the kitchen to get some water, trying to shake off the tension. But the memories of that night wouldn't let me. Every detail, the car, the rain, the streetlights, the way she studied me, played over and over in my mind. I realized I couldn't let fear dominate my life. I had to transform it into awareness and caution. I checked all my locks again, double-checked the doors, and even reviewed my escape plan in case something happened again. I thought about the moral of my experience. Survival isn't about luck. It's about instincts, attention, and readiness. Every small observation I had made that night, the glint in her eyes, the way she spoke, her calculated calm, had been crucial. I wrote down another note in my journal. Stay alert, trust instincts, don't ignore warning signs. Then I turned off the lights and tried to sleep again, focusing on the lessons I had learned rather than the fear. I knew I had survived something unimaginable, and now the challenge was to live each day with vigilance, courage, and awareness. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would move forward, but I would never forget the night I escaped the serial killer's trap. Morning came with a strange calm, like the world had decided to give me a break. Sunlight filled the room, and for a moment I almost felt normal again. Almost, but the fear hadn't disappeared. It had just learned to sit quietly inside me. I went about my routine carefully, checking my surroundings before stepping outside. Every habit I had once done automatically now required thought. I locked the door, paused, listened, then walked away. Awareness had become second nature. On my way to work, I noticed something unsettling. A dark-colored car slowed behind me at a red light. My chest tightened instantly. My grip on the steering wheel stiffened as I checked the mirror again and again. It wasn't her, just a coincidence. Still, my heart didn't slow right away. That was when I realized how deeply that night had changed me. Trauma doesn't disappear overnight, it reshapes you. At work, I struggled to focus. Faces blurred, voices faded. My mind kept drifting back to the rain, the car, the narrow streets. Then a coworker leaned over and said quietly, "You don't look okay." I hesitated, then finally spoke. "I almost didn't make it home one night," I said. They didn't interrupt. They listened. And for the first time since it happened, I felt the weight ease just a little. Saying it out loud made it real, but it also made it lighter. Later that day, as I walked back to my car, I noticed a flyer on a pole. "Stay alert, report suspicious activity." The words felt personal, like they were meant just for me. I stood there for a moment, breathing slowly. I understood something important then. Surviving isn't just escaping danger. It's choosing not to let it silence you, freeze you, or shrink your life. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove home with steady hands. The fear was still there, but now it shared space with strength, awareness, and resolve. That night had tried to take everything from me. It failed, and I was no longer the same person who had stopped that car in the rain. That evening, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of hiding or letting fear dictate my actions, I focused on preparation. I researched self-defense, personal safety tips, and survival strategies. Every article, every video, every tip felt like armor, slowly building my confidence. I also started keeping a small emergency kit in my bag, a whistle, pepper spray, a flashlight, and my phone fully charged at all times. Every item was a reminder that I had power, tools to help me stay safe, not just hope I would survive. Later, I took a short walk around my neighborhood. The streets were quiet, familiar, but my mind remained alert. I noticed things I hadn't before, the way some houses had poor lighting, areas where someone could hide, and even potential escape routes if I ever needed them. A sense of control began to replace my fear. It wasn't complete. Fear would never fully disappear, but it no longer ruled me. I had taken steps to protect myself, and that gave me strength. I thought about the night I had escaped, replaying it in my mind like a lesson plan. Every detail mattered, the way she had studied me, the signs I almost missed, the choices I made under pressure. It all became a blueprint for staying safe in the future. When I returned home, I sat down and wrote another note in my journal. Fear can teach, but preparation empowers. Awareness is the best defense. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of peace. I had survived. I had learned. And I had begun to reclaim my life, not as a victim, but as someone who had faced danger, acted decisively, and come out alive. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Every step I took now would be informed by what I had learned, vigilance, courage, and the determination never to be trapped again. The following night, sleep still eluded me. I kept imagining what could have happened if I hadn't noticed the little signs, the way her eyes never blinked when she spoke, the way she had studied my reactions. Those details had saved my life. I decided I needed to reinforce my sense of security. I checked all the doors, windows, and even the back alleyway behind my apartment. Everything was locked, secure, and monitored. I installed a small motion sensor light outside, just in case. Sitting in the quiet of my living room, I realized how much I had grown. Fear was still present, but it had transformed into a tool, an alert system that reminded me to stay aware, to trust my instincts, and to be proactive. I thought about the moral behind everything I had experienced. Life can change in an instant, and danger often hides in plain sight. But courage, awareness, and decisive action can turn even the darkest moments into survival. I poured myself a cup of tea and reviewed my journal again. Each entry reminded me of the lessons I had learned, the importance of observation, the value of trusting your gut, and the power of taking action rather than freezing in fear. Later, I called a close friend, wanting to talk about the night and the lingering anxiety. Sharing my experience helped me process it, and I realized another key lesson. Survival isn't just physical, it's emotional. Reaching out, seeking support, and not facing fear alone strengthens your resilience. By the time I hung up, a calm determination settled over me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning, growing, and preparing to face whatever might come next with courage and awareness. The night outside was still dark and quiet, but inside I felt a light that fear could never extinguish. The knowledge that I had escaped, learned, and would never underestimate danger again. A few days later, I decided to take a cautious walk through the city streets during the evening. The air was crisp, the sidewalks wet from an earlier rain, and every shadow seemed sharper than usual. My heart still skipped at every unexpected noise, but I forced myself to move steadily, observing everything around me. Passing a bus stop, I noticed a stranger acting oddly, lingering, glancing around, shifting constantly. My first instinct was to feel panic, but then I remembered what I had learned. Stay calm, observe, assess, and act if necessary. I kept a safe distance, noting the details, the person's movements, clothing, and direction. It was nothing dangerous this time, but the exercise reminded me how important awareness was. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. I thought back to the night I had almost been trapped, the way she had controlled the situation with calm precision. That memory made me more vigilant, not fearful. I realized that survival wasn't just about running. It was about reading the signs, thinking ahead, and trusting instincts over assumption. Later, I sat in a small cafe, jotting notes in my journal. I wrote down everything I noticed that evening, reinforcing the habit of awareness. Each detail, no matter how small, could make the difference in a dangerous situation. The moral was clear. The world can be unpredictable, and danger can appear in ordinary moments. But training your mind to notice, assess, and respond empowers you to act before fear paralyzes you. By the time I left the cafe, the night had grown darker, but I felt lighter. I was no longer a passive observer of life. I was alert, prepared, and determined. The terror of that stormy night still lingered, but it had transformed into lessons I could carry forward. And I knew deep inside that vigilance and courage could protect me, even when the unexpected appeared. That night, I decided to practice situational awareness at home. I walked through every room, checking doors, windows, and potential entry points. I imagined different scenarios, someone breaking in, a stranger lurking outside, and visualized how I would react. I realized that fear alone wasn't enough to keep me safe. Action, preparation, and planning were equally important. The adrenaline I had felt during the stormy night had taught me how quickly decisions could mean life or death. Now I was turning that lesson into strategy. I also reviewed the escape routes I had used that night. The way I had spotted the gas station, the timing of my run, the way I drew attention to myself without provoking her. It all mattered. Each detail reinforced the principle that awareness plus action could save your life. Later, I practiced simple self-defense moves I had learned not to be aggressive but to build confidence. Even small gestures, blocking, twisting away, using leverage, felt empowering. It was no longer about fear, it was about readiness. As I sat down with a cup of tea, I reflected on the moral of my experience. Life can change in an instant. Danger can appear when you least expect it, disguised as something ordinary. But vigilance, preparation, and decisive action transform fear into survival. I wrote one final note for the night. Fear teaches, but preparation empowers. Awareness is the key to safety. The storm outside had long since passed, leaving only the quiet hum of the city. Inside, I felt a newfound sense of strength. I had survived the night, I had learned its lessons, and I was determined never to underestimate danger again. And I knew that, moving forward, I would carry these lessons with me, alert, aware, and ready for whatever life might throw my way. The following morning, I woke up feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. The night's memories still lingered, but I knew I couldn't let them control my life. Surviving wasn't enough. I needed to transform the experience into strength and awareness. I checked the news online. There were updates about police investigations, but no confirmed capture. A shiver ran down my spine. She was still out there somewhere, but I refused to let that fear dominate me. I decided to take a short walk in daylight, practicing awareness in a safer environment. Every street corner, every pedestrian, every parked car became part of my mental map. I noticed details I had never paid attention to before, the way people moved, the gaps in lighting, potential hazards. Each observation strengthened my sense of control. As I walked, I thought about the night I had escaped. I remembered how quickly fear had turned into focused action, how every second mattered, and how the small decisions I made saved my life. It wasn't luck, it was awareness, intuition, and courage. I paused by a small fountain, reflecting on the lessons. Life is unpredictable. Danger can appear in ordinary moments, but preparation, observation, and decisive action empower you to survive. I whispered to myself, I will trust my instincts. I will stay aware, I will act when necessary. By the time I returned home, the city felt different, less threatening, more navigable. Fear still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. I had survived, learned, and grown stronger. And in that moment, I understood the ultimate truth. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the mastery of it. That evening, I decided to share my experience with a close friend. I knew talking about it could help me process everything and reinforce the lessons I had learned. We sat in my living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows on the walls. I recounted the night, the rain, the car, her smile, the way she studied me. I explained how small details had saved my life, noticing the glint in her eyes, observing her calm demeanor, and trusting my instincts. My friend listened intently, their expression a mix of concern and awe. When I finished, they said quietly, "You were incredibly brave. Most people would freeze. You acted." I nodded. "I was scared, but fear doesn't have to paralyze you. It can guide you if you pay attention and act wisely." We discussed safety measures, avoiding isolated streets, always letting someone know where you are, carrying personal protection, and staying alert in everyday situations. I realized that sharing my story wasn't just therapeutic. It could educate and prepare others to avoid similar danger. Later, I reflected on the moral again. Surviving the trap wasn't just about running. It was about observation, awareness, and quick thinking. Fear had forced me to sharpen my senses, but courage and action had saved me. As the night grew darker, I felt a sense of calm determination. I had survived, learned, and grown stronger. The stormy night had tried to break me, but it had instead taught me resilience, awareness, and the importance of trusting one's instincts. And in that quiet evening, I understood fully. Surviving danger isn't just about escape. It's about learning, growing, and using every lesson to live stronger and safer. A few days later, I decided to take another walk at dusk, this time deliberately practicing situational awareness. The streets were quieter than usual, and the orange glow of the streetlights reflected on the wet pavement. Every shadow, every flicker of movement felt sharper, more significant. I passed a narrow alley and instinctively glanced inside. Nothing. But that split-second observation reminded me how quickly danger can hide in plain sight. I realized how much my instincts had sharpened since that night. I noticed things I would have overlooked before: loose trash bins, uneven pavement, and even the sound of footsteps behind me. My mind replayed the critical moments of the night I escaped. Each decision I had made, sliding the door, running toward the gas station, calling for help, had been a calculated act of survival. Fear had pushed me into heightened awareness, but it was courage and action that had saved me. I paused under a street lamp, letting the lesson settle in. Life could change in an instant, and danger could appear when you least expected it. But awareness and decisive action give you a chance, sometimes the only chance, to survive. As I continued walking, I felt a subtle shift inside me. Fear still existed, but it no longer controlled me. It had become a tool, a reminder to stay alert and prepared, not a force to paralyze me. By the time I returned home, the night felt less threatening. I understood that surviving a trap isn't about luck. It's about sharpening your mind, trusting your instincts, and acting decisively when it matters most. Sitting at my desk, I wrote in my journal, "Fear can guide you, but courage and awareness define you." And I knew from that day on I would live with a new vigilance, a readiness, and a deeper respect for the power of observation and action. That night, I couldn't help but review the events in my mind once again. Even though days had passed, the memory of her eyes, her smile, and the stormy streets remained vivid. I realized the experience had changed me, not just emotionally, but mentally. I sat at my desk, reviewing my notes and journal entries. Each detail mattered: the timing of my actions, the decisions I made under pressure, and the small signals I had noticed that saved my life. I understood now that survival isn't accidental, it's deliberate. Every choice counts. I also considered the moral of my story. Fear is natural, but it doesn't have to control you. When fear sharpens your awareness, it becomes a tool. When combined with action, preparation, and courage, it can be a life-saving guide. I checked the locks and windows once more, a habit that had become second nature. Then I practiced mental exercises, imagining possible scenarios and how I would respond. Each simulation strengthened my confidence and focus. Later, I spoke to a close friend about the lessons I had learned. Sharing my story reinforced my understanding. Life can change in an instant, and the only way to survive danger is through observation, quick thinking, and decisive action. As I finally lay down to rest, I felt a quiet sense of empowerment. The terror of that night was still part of me, but it had transformed into knowledge, awareness, and resilience. I had survived, and I had learned the true power of trusting instincts and acting when it mattered most. And in that quiet night, I promised myself I would carry these lessons forward, staying vigilant, prepared, and courageous, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The following morning, I woke up determined to continue reclaiming my life. Fear had taught me vigilance, but I wanted to move forward without letting it dominate my every thought. I started with small routines, checking my surroundings, planning routes, and practicing awareness wherever I went. At work, I shared some of my experience with a trusted colleague, emphasizing the lessons rather than the fear. "It's not just about surviving," I said quietly. "It's about paying attention, noticing the details, and trusting your instincts. That's what keeps you safe." They nodded, and I realized that sharing my story wasn't just therapeutic. It could also help others stay alert. Awareness could be taught, and lessons learned from danger could empower people to avoid it. Later that day, I walked home through a busy street. I observed everything: people, parked cars, shadows, and light. Each detail sharpened my awareness, reinforcing the habit I had cultivated since that stormy night. I reflected on the moral again: danger is often hidden in ordinary moments, disguised as normalcy. But vigilance, preparedness, and decisive action can make the difference between life and death. As evening fell, I returned home, feeling a growing sense of control. The terror I had experienced had not broken me. Instead, it had taught me resilience, awareness, and the power of acting with clarity and courage. I sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. The world could be unpredictable, but I was no longer a passive participant. I was alert, prepared, and ready to face whatever came my way, with the lessons of survival guiding every step. And I knew deep inside that I had transformed fear into strength and terror into wisdom. That night, I decided to test my preparedness in a controlled way. I walked around my apartment building, observing the entrances, alleys, and street corners. Every detail mattered: the way lights flickered, shadows formed, and sounds echoed. I was practicing awareness, not paranoia. I imagined different scenarios: a stranger approaching aggressively, someone following me, or an unexpected threat. For each, I visualized my response: calm, decisive, and confident. The fear I had once felt in the stormy night had transformed into vigilance and mental strength. Back inside, I reviewed my emergency kit: pepper spray, whistle, flashlight, and fully charged phone. Each item was a tool, a reminder that preparedness could be a lifeline in danger. I felt a sense of control I had never known before that night. I also reflected on the moral of my experience. The night I escaped had been terrifying, but it had taught me that survival depends on more than luck. Observation, intuition, and action are far more powerful than fear alone. As I wrote in my journal, I realized something crucial. Every small detail matters. Every instinct, every decision, every action can tip the balance between life and death. Awareness is not just a skill, it is a responsibility to yourself. By the time I went to bed, I felt a quiet confidence. The terror of that night was still part of my memory, but it no longer had power over me. I had survived, learned, and grown stronger. And in that quiet moment, I understood fully. Fear is temporary, but preparedness, awareness, and courage can last a lifetime. The next morning, I woke up determined to integrate the lessons I had learned into my everyday life. Fear no longer controlled me. It had become a teacher, sharpening my instincts and forcing me to pay attention to details I once ignored. I started my day with small routines, checking doors, ensuring my phone was fully charged, and planning my route carefully. Even minor decisions like which streets to walk or which areas to avoid became part of my strategy to stay safe. At work, I spoke briefly with a colleague about situational awareness. "It's not about being paranoid," I said. "It's about noticing the little things that can keep you safe. The smallest detail can save your life." Later, walking home, I observed the people and surroundings around me with a new intensity. Every movement, every glance, every sound mattered. I was practicing vigilance, and it felt empowering rather than frightening. That night, I reflected on the moral again. Danger can appear when you least expect it, often disguised as something ordinary. But awareness, preparation, and decisive action can give you the upper hand. Survival is not just about fleeing, it's about thinking, observing, and responding effectively. I sat by the window, the city lights glowing in the distance. The stormy night that had once threatened to end my life had transformed me. I was no longer passive. I was alert, prepared, and capable. And I realized the most important lesson of all. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the mastery of it. I had survived, and I would carry that strength with me always. That evening, I decided to practice a more active form of preparedness. I walked through my neighborhood with a friend, explaining how to notice potential threats and trust instincts. Every shadow, every unusual movement became a lesson in awareness. We passed a narrow alley, and I pointed out how it could be a hidden danger zone at night. "Even in familiar places, danger can hide," I said. "The key is to stay alert, notice details, and plan an escape route if needed." Later, we reached a busy street. I observed cars, people, and possible escape routes, demonstrating how to think a few steps ahead. My friend listened carefully, nodding. I realized that sharing my experience wasn't just about me, it could help someone else avoid danger. Back home, I reflected on the night I escaped. Every small observation had mattered, the glint in her eyes, the calm way she studied me, and the timing of my actions. Those details had saved my life. I understood now that survival isn't about luck, it's about observation, awareness, and decisive action. I sat by the window, writing in my journal. Fear is a teacher, awareness is a tool, and action is the key to survival. The stormy night that had once terrified me now felt like a turning point. It had reshaped my instincts, sharpened my mind, and taught me the power of vigilance. And as the city lights flickered outside, I realized the lessons I had learned were not just for me. They were a guide to living safely, courageously, and with eyes wide open. That night, I couldn't sleep easily. Memories of that stormy night returned, the rain, the car, her calculating smile. But this time, fear didn't overwhelm me. It was a reminder, a signal to stay aware and prepared. I decided to review everything I had learned so far. I went through my journal, noting key lessons. Trust your instincts, notice small details, prepare for unexpected situations, and act decisively. Each entry reminded me how those habits had saved my life. I checked my emergency kit once more, making sure everything was in place. Pepper spray, whistle, flashlight, fully charged phone. Each item was not just a tool, but a symbol of control and readiness. Later, I practiced mental scenarios in my mind. What I would do if someone approached aggressively, how I could escape, and how to draw attention without escalating danger. These exercises didn't make me paranoid, they made me strong and confident. As I sat by the window looking at the quiet streets below, I realized something profound. Surviving danger isn't just about fleeing, it's about sharpening your mind, trusting your instincts, and turning fear into actionable awareness. The stormy night that had once threatened to end my life had instead taught me resilience, courage, and the importance of vigilance. I had survived, learned, and grown stronger, and I knew deep inside that these lessons would stay with me forever, guiding me through any challenge that life might bring. The following day, I decided to take a proactive step. I attended a self-defense workshop. I wasn't just learning physical moves. I was learning how to stay aware, read situations, and respond quickly under pressure. The instructor emphasized that awareness is the most powerful tool. He explained that noticing subtle details, posture, gaze, or unusual behavior can often prevent a confrontation before it happens. I realized how true this was, remembering the night I had escaped. Every small observation had saved my life. During the drills, I practiced escaping holds, blocking attacks, and using leverage rather than brute strength. Each movement felt empowering. For the first time, I felt a sense of confidence I hadn't known before. Fear had taught me vigilance, but training gave me the skills to act decisively if needed. After the workshop, I walked home slowly, reflecting on what I had learned. Survival isn't just about reacting, it's about preparation, observation, and having the courage to act. I thought about the moral of my story. Danger can appear in ordinary moments, but awareness, strategy, and courage can turn fear into power. I reached home and sat quietly, reviewing my journal once more. Every lesson from that night, the rain, the car, her calm, calculating behavior, had become part of my guide for life. And in that quiet evening, I realized something vital. Surviving a threat doesn't just change your night. It can change the way you live, the way you observe, and the way you trust yourself. I was no longer just someone who had escaped danger. I was someone prepared, aware, and determined never to be caught off guard again. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to a sense of normalcy, but I was forever changed. The stormy night, the car, her calculating smile, they remained vivid in my memory, but no longer as a source of paralyzing fear. They had become lessons, tools that shaped the way I lived each day. I continued practicing awareness, carrying my emergency kit, and sharing my experiences with friends and colleagues. Every conversation, every precaution reinforced what I had learned. Survival depends on vigilance, preparation, and trusting your instincts. One quiet evening, I sat by the window, reflecting on the journey. I realized the true moral of my story. Life can change in an instant. Danger often appears disguised as ordinary moments. But courage, awareness, and decisive action empower you to survive and even thrive. I thought about the moments that had saved me, the small observations, the split-second decisions, the choice to act rather than freeze. Those moments had not only preserved my life, but had also transformed me into someone stronger, more alert, and more determined. As the night settled, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had survived the unimaginable, learned its lessons, and grown resilient, and I knew that the wisdom I had gained would guide me forever. I whispered to myself, "Fear may visit, but awareness and courage will always protect me." And with that, I knew I had truly escaped, not just a trap, but a life lived unaware, and I was ready to move forward stronger than ever. The story ends, but the lessons live on.